The tabletop takeaway.
Game mechanics on display.
3 designers share the stage.
Pick a genre and we'll play.
The tabletop takeaway.
Welcome back to the Tabletop Takeaway in our bonus episode about roll and writes. I'm Ananda Gunaratna.
I'm Charlie McCarran.
And I'm Trevor Muller-Hagel.
And we've looked at 3 pretty different roll and writes. We've looked at That's Pretty Clever, Three Sisters, Cartographers. Obviously, there are lots of other ones out there. Generally, I think with roll and writes, the whole thing is you have a common randomizer, right? Generally, cards or dice, and everyone reacts to that randomizer, which I guess is a little bit similar to our previous probability farming.
But it's a nice complement to it, too.
Yeah, and the writing, I think, is a big part of the genre. Generally, roll and writes are going to result in permanent changes to your personal board, which is a restriction. That does limit the sort of game that you can make to some extent, but it also frees you up a lot because you don't need to worry about component counts. Imagine Three Sisters. Imagine making that as a traditional game with pieces. You would need a lot of pieces, I think.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you had to have that many goods being tracked, or maybe even if it was on a track, that track could be really big.
But on the farms, I can imagine some sort of stacking tokens. But
my students actually at Stout made a game called Farm Wars, and they cut out individual, very nicely arted pieces and made them 3D.
Oh my God!
They brought it in one day, and I'm like, you guys cut out individual corn pieces, and it was so much. It looked cool, but too much.
Yeah, and I guess that's maybe the biggest reason to do roll and writes is that because you're writing everything down, there's just a lot of stuff you can do without having to worry about component costs.
Yeah,
right.
Which makes it popular for the publishers too.
Yeah, and the art on it really can play into the feel of
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm very visual focused when I'm thinking about games, and especially cartographers, feels like you're evolving this map. But I think having Three Sisters already has a beautiful pre-drawn background.
Right. Yeah.
And you're just filling in a little bit, but you still get a really cool feel. So I think there's way more room to explore there, too.
Oh, yeah. The genre in general, I think, has a lot of flexibility. And I know there's a few other roll and writes that are constantly in development or coming out soon. And, they're always kind of pushing little parts of the boundaries, right? It's a big genre that I think has a lot of room for exploration.
Yeah, and also on a purely mechanical level, there is something very satisfying about filling in little boxes. Standardized tests are awful, and I don't like them. But filling in those bubbles was kind of satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can feel that.
Yeah. I realized actually I was working on another roll and write long ago about, it was a word game actually. It was kind of like crossword puzzle with words on the dice.
Oh.
But I didn't even really think of it back then as roll and write, but it was.
Didn't Connor Wake have something like that? A crossword?
Oh, yeah. He also had been working on something crossword.
Yeah. We played that. It was I don't remember if it was...
Yeah.
I think it might
don't know how much we want to say about his prototype.
Oh, yeah.
It was pretty cool, though.
Yes.
And it was a good... Yeah. Well, just ask Connor about that if you want to test that game. Because it wasn't that we were rolling the dice. It was more like you're kind of choosing.
Yeah, I don't remember what the randomizer was.
I think it was the people.
The people? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, that's another element, cards, and when you mention the randomizer, it's usually cards or dice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a good way to make a roll and write with somebody just thinking in their head about making a choice. I guess
Tiny Towns I mean, it's not a roll. You don't write anything down.
You pick the thing.
Yeah, Tiny
and then
Towns.
Everyone else follows.
Yes. So that's
So I guess like action
kind
following.
of adjacent. Yeah.
Yeah, action following games like Puerto Rico and
Yeah.
San Juan.
so on.
Yeah. Of course, that's getting away a bit from the writing aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think, I really want to try and see, what other kind of mashups you can do in this genre. I know Devin Metlin is working on a game right now that's basically a battler, an arena battler that's also a roll and write.
So, it occurred to me, my early prototype of Junkernauts, it did not have rolling, but there was writing. You created your little your little fighting...
Your toaster.
Yeah, your little fighting machines on little circular chips by drawing on them using erasable marker, and then you'd use those. Now, of course, those moved around, so that was sort of like a hybrid. But you did have the freedom to draw whatever components you wanted to make your little robot.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
And
as much as I love your plastic big models with like pieces you put in them,
And flame coming off of them.
I think my very favorite moments of just trying your prototypes was like, ooh, I get to just draw this little guy on the chip.
Yeah, and,
So-
now it can do stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now it has the powers of whatever gun or sword you put on it.
Oh,
Yeah.
fascinating. That's fun.
So yeah, I mean, roll and writes. I guess that's one direction you can go, right? Roll and writes are static, but you could be writing the things on things that you can move around.
Right. That doesn't have to be on a board itself, but you
Right.
could have pieces or have it be modular or,
Right.
yeah.
And the difficulty there, I guess, is that paper is a lot cheaper than having tokens you can only use once. So that's why you need erasable tokens.
Right. Having that, yeah.
Now I'm curious to see a Junkernauts flip and write or roll and write.
Junkernauts roll and write.
Where you one element comes out and you decide how to add it to your
Oh,
bots.
do you add a sword or do you add a gun? Do you
Yeah.
move two
I-
or do you?
I should say, for the benefit of listeners, Junkernauts is a game where you build robots out of household junk with little plastic snap-together pieces, and then they move around and fight each other. But the early version of it, you weren't snapping together pieces; you were just drawing the pieces on a little chip.
But yeah, it just shows like how deep this kind of genre can go, where you have like either that flexibility of artistry and like, oh, I really want to like do something fun with this, and you're drawing on something small or you're drawing on something big. Yeah, it's a fun place where you can have a lot of logic and creativity kind of mashed together.
Yeah.
Which is a fun thing. I like those things.
And Trevor, we can't forget that we teased that we would hear about your 24 hours design process to do a roll and write.
And this is just a spoiler for everyone listening. That was the first episode of this series, and this is still the same day for us, even though it's almost a month later for you.
When were we gonna? I was wondering if our audience would ever hear that little secret.
I think they know.
And if you didn't catch this episode, then you don't even know, so don't even worry about it. But so I was working on it, and I'm really working on having it be a co-op, because I really like working on co-ops now, and I really want to kind of advance myself in that design space. But having it be where you have modular heroes, so one character will have a personality or a character, and then they'll have an ability with them, and you can actually upgrade it by spending actions to upgrade instead of fighting, or you can spend it on fighting to stop the villain. And so like the villain will be a central thing, and maybe the city will be part of that too. And so you have all these little things moving around, but if you're not careful, the villain somehow gets more powerful too. Maybe like if the dice you don't spend, that can go to the villain and they get stronger that way. Very similar to That's Pretty Clever, where the dice you don't use go to the other players. And so I'm actually taking a lot of inspiration from That's Pretty Clever for this game, because I really like the set. Like this one goes to this spot, this one goes to this spot. And then the villain can have the same thing on their end, so your runoff goes to the villain. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
So wait, is this a spin-off of probability farming
I'm
version of the game?
I'm thinking about combining probability farming into it so that like you can power up certain colors, and so that when you do roll it, you actually do better at that when you use it. So it's a little bit of a split version of it.
I like that mashup. You're
Right?
already rolling the dice.
You're already rolling dice.
Why not get an instant benefit for everybody?
Right.
That's
And then
great.
also that means you're leaning towards a specific strategy, and it means that like something like the foxes doesn't make a whole lot of sense for this, because you can specialize in something.
Mm-hmm.
But then that means your runoff is going to be going to the villain, and they're going to be specializing in your kind of weaknesses. And so you have that automatic like interplay, which I think is really has a lot of potential.
Yeah,
I just need to play with it more.
I like it.
Yeah.
Trying to think what I would do with a roll and write.
I mean, I've already had two ideas just
Since we've been recording.
Yeah.
yeah,
So one thing I think could be explored a bit more that would work really well with a roll and write is so I played this computer game Chants of Sennar recently, which is, by the way, quite good. It's about translating languages using contextual clues, and I think that's something that could work really well with a roll and write, because with languages, if you're making up a language and trying to get people to understand what it is, like this would be a written language probably, that takes advantage of the scope of roll and writes for creativity in just being able to do anything, right? Not being restricted by components. So I think that could be something really interesting to explore, a roll and write about figuring out languages from contextual clues, and using that to solve problems or communicate with other players.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Super abstract.
yeah, I like it. I want to see this game happen. I always love games that might be a little ambiguous in terms of.
Especially like if
what
it
does that
involves more
mean?
creativity.
Yeah.
You're actually like having to, be more abstract with how you're thinking about things and not just I put in a box, which boxes are fun, but this is outside of the box. Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that too. I think maybe I would try to do something a little more art-based, maybe with either flipping cards and then everyone interprets that card and does adds to their drawing or something. I don't know. Or the dice have different aspects that maybe it's a party game, roll and write kind of thing. Like
Yeah, you have to have a squiggly line and a straight line, but you're trying to draw a fish.
Yeah, something like that.
What?
Wasn't there there was a
Maybe-
prototype at Design Days like that, wasn't there? With
The back and forth.
with the transparent
Yeah. Where you're trying to give clues to your friends, but on the other side is the other person drawing their clues to their friends. That guy? That game?
Oh, I don't think I played that one.
I didn't play it, but I saw it, and it's Tim.
Yeah.
I don't remember Tim's last name.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And if you don't know
Well,
about
maybe-
Design Days and you're in the Twin Cities,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
swing
you
on
should-
by and let us know.
You
Yeah.
should come to Design Days.
Yeah, that's Trevor's.
Shameless plug.
And if you're not in the Twin Cities, be like Trevor and start a community.
Start a
that's
Design Days
just-
in your city.
Yeah. That's
Reach out to me
that's
if you
great
want to
that
know what I did.
Yeah, it's
it wasn't
great.
very hard. It
You
was
just
great.
were consistent,
Yep.
like twice a month,
Yep.
meetups.
Just a beating drum.
It's so helpful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I guess sort of getting back to like roll and write games in general. The being able to draw anything is a big strength. Being able to do stuff simultaneously is a big strength. Definitely both things to consider if you want to make a roll and write, like how you're going to leverage those strengths.
Yeah, I do like the simultaneous action. That definitely tends to be more common these days too. I think a lot more younger folks also really appreciate simultaneous play. My nephew being one of them.
Nice.
He hates downtime.
Yeah.
He will get up and walk away from the table. It's like, oh man,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's only 2 or 3 minutes. Come on.
Yep.
And
But-
The
and then-
danger, of course, is like in Three Sisters, where like
One
one
person-
player has
They figured out the combo.
figured
and
out
now
Yeah.
the combo, and their
Bonusing for
turn
the
is
next
like
2 hours.
3 times as long as yours.
yeah.
Yep.
I think
Even in That's So Clever, it can happen. But
to a lesser extent.
I mean, it's pretty
that's,
clever.
That's pretty clever. Oh, gosh, I realized why Trevor pointed out So Clover
Yeah.
on my shelf, and I'm like, yeah, that's
So
why I'm
clever.
called.
Which I actually thought might have been a riff off of that's so clever, but then I
it's
realized
not,
that's pretty clever. So I'm just
No,
I think
I'm just lost and confused.
interestingly, all three of the games we looked at have interesting ways for people to interact.
Yeah.
In a genre that's, I think, often thought of as being sort of multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah.
Like cartographers, obviously, you place monsters on other players' maps. Three Sisters, you're competing over
The dice.
The dice. That's pretty clever. The active player is choosing which dice other players are going to get. So they all have just a little bit of interaction, which is interesting.
And I do think it's good to have that too, right? Like, because then you have that player-to-player interaction, which honestly, Three Sisters does still feel like it's multiplayer solitaire.
Yeah, that one has, I think, the lightest interaction.
Outside of maybe even cartographers, if you don't draw enough of the monsters, because then you're not getting that interaction, and you're kind of relying on the deck to provide that interaction. So I could see that being a little bit less as well in some games, in some playthroughs. We got two monsters, which is good.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what my design is going to be next.
Ooh.
Because you got me thinking about player interactions. And it would be interesting to test. Okay, so normally we're all looking at the central thing, and we all do some variant of it on our board.
Sure.
But I always like when games, I've tried to do this in a few games where the space in between other players is your thing. So maybe each person rolls a die to their left and right. And then, so there'd be like 2 dice between me and Trevor, 2 dice between me and Ananda, and 2 between you two guys.
Sure.
And then maybe you're kind of looking, or maybe it's cards or something, and you're looking at those 2 sides and deciding what you want to do. Kind of like thinking more about what your neighbor's doing too. Yeah. Just to get around the feeling of like, well, anyone could play this game. And
did Hedge Mage have...
Hedge Mage, yes. So that is a game I developed for Floodgate Games. I can talk about it now, finally. But
yeah, I saw that Origins.
It actually has a lot in common with Flip and Writes, because it is kind of like...
It is basically without the writing part.
And you put the polyomino down. It's like bingo style.
The polyominoes don't move.
They can.
They can.
Right? Not anymore?
Not so much anymore.
Oh,
I think that was a special thing we got rid of because it was too confusing.
Oh, gotcha.
So, I mean, theoretically, those could have just been drawn. I guess you would need very big pieces of paper, though. So that would have worked.
Well, Hedge Mage, you can look it up. It will be on Kickstarter sometime this fall.
Oh, great.
But the idea is you're putting these polyomino tiles down as a maze for the player to your right to...
Right.
And player to your left.
Player to your direction.
Yep, player to you. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm thinking of... I instantly was also thinking of Karuba, too, because that's got that sort of bingo mechanic. Everyone does the same thing, and then... Is bingo the first one, right?
I guess technically probably. Well no, hang on. Bingo, I mean, Yahtzee's probably not as... I would imagine bingo's older than Yahtzee.
I don't know.
And Yahtzee also is... There's no simultaneity. It's just you roll and you write for yourself.
So bingo is really the simultaneous one that you could play with hundreds of people. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Was
his name-o?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bingo.
Well,
the original roll and write.
Yeah. It's just fun making these connections to different mechanics.
Well, and I just want to, before I forgot, if you haven't played Seven Wonders Architects, that actually does have like shared decks between the people to your left and right, which is interesting. Obviously, no writing, and it doesn't have the big text point thing at the end as well. Mm-hmm. It's a much simpler Seven Wonders.
Sure.
But you actually get to build the wonder with tiles, which is a lot of fun, and you can get benefits from that as well. So I think there is definitely some legitimacy to like playing off of left and right, because then you can have, like with this game, they say it's 1 to 100 players for cartographers, right? Mm-hmm. So like that means as long as you have someone to your left and right, you can be part of the game.
Right.
You just need the paper. And so, like, you'll always have left and right manipulation, which I really like. Yeah.
So takeaways.
Takeaways.
Yes.
Tabletop takeaways.
Yeah, I guess my takeaway is if you're making a roll and write, see if you can take advantage of the fact that you can write anything, really.
Explore the space.
Yeah. And also see if you can take advantage of the fact that you don't need components, so you can have, as Three Sisters did, you can have a lot of boxes.
You can have so many boxes.
Because if you're making a roll and write, you should be taking advantage, I think, of the advantages of the genre.
Yeah.
So like make a game that would normally require a ridiculous number of components, but now they can all just be on a sheet of paper.
Yep. You can X things out, circle things twice.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway.
I think my takeaway, and I just realized it now, I was thinking about how the one advantage of this genre is the exciting moment where everyone's invested in what's coming up. Cartographers has the flip. It's like, yes, we got that weird water.
Oh, yeah, I can now finish that one and get 10 points. Awesome.
And we're all excited about it. And that's pretty clever. Also, we feel like real excited about those rolls. And Three Sisters did not have that, though. And I was just wondering about, like, part of the rondelle system is pretty... It's a little bland, to be honest, with, like, we know these possible actions are here.
Right.
Yeah.
So that part is not the fun, exciting part of the game, to me, personally.
Oh, sure.
And, the dice rolls are generally going to create some pattern.
Yeah, the dice, the numbers on the dice, generally, there are some numbers that are bad because you've already filled in that section of the garden. But there aren't any numbers where you're like, oh, yes, it's so good that was rolled. I'm so happy about that.
Right.
Because all the different parts of the garden are pretty much the same.
They're pretty equal. Yeah, there's not like this is the best garden. And obviously they're weighted a little bit because some have more pumpkins or more something.
But there's nothing, you're right, there's nothing you're excited about seeing.
Right. So
unless you're really wanting that shed action. And you get the shed action, but that's the rondelle
that's the
action.
rondelle. That has nothing to do with the dice.
Yeah.
Right.
So that game, it's for a different crowd, I think. Maybe it's for someone who really wants to think about all the possible actions you can do.
Yeah, that it's because even that's pretty clever. You are more like invested in the die rolls.
Oh yeah, you care a lot about what is rolled on the dice.
And this is much more, or Three Sisters is much more of an economic like simulation game, where you want things to be a little bit more predictable so that you can make more plans. But that comes at the cost of being less exciting too, I think. And you could definitely marry the two together, but I think the audience specifically, if they're wanting a more economic game, they want it to be more predictable and I don't want to say blander, but just like able to trigger things easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that would be my test, I think, in the future of roll and writes, flip and writes is like, for me, I like the kind of game where it's an exciting moment. So if your game is lacking that moment, it might be a sign that maybe your, whatever interactions are happening, or there's not enough tension in your design, so that people don't care one way or the other which one comes up.
Yeah, Ananda did get very excited, but never about the dice rolls. The die rolls.
Right.
Yeah. All the parts of the game that were really fun had very little to do with the dice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is funny because normally dice is what gets you excited for dice-based games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it's like, Three Sisters just feels more like input randomness. Like Castles of Burgundy is like that too, where it's like you roll these two dice, but then you can do kind of whatever with them.
Sure.
So
technically they're all kind of input randomness, aren't they?
In all these games? Yeah, they are.
Sort of. Well, I guess re-rolling is where it can sometimes turn into output randomness.
Yeah.
But I think in general, this genre sort of thrives on input randomness.
That's true. Why does it feel so fun then?
Well,
I mean, no. I like input randomness games where you get to think about it too. But it's more that, yeah.
I think, well, here's the thing. Like, if you compare this to, say, Carcassonne, another game with strong input randomness, in Carcassonne, you have absolutely no idea what tile you're going to draw. Right. You can't really say, oh, I really hope it's this tile, because probably it isn't that tile.
A strong chance.
But in this game with dice, or even in cartographers where there are very iconic pieces that you recognize because they came up earlier, or cards, I should say, there's a very limited number of possibilities. Like, especially with dice, there's 6 sides to a die. Like, if I know I want a purple 6, that's very easy to visualize, right? Like, oh, I'm going to roll it. It could be a 6. Like, I can see that happening. That's not outside the realm of possibility. And so you're very excited because there are some outcomes which you really want to happen, and you can see them happening with a decently good chance.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what it's input randomness, but it's exciting because you can anticipate the inputs that you really want to use.
I have a perfect story about this, actually. I mentioned in the last episode of my game, Land of 10,000 Mistakes, which was a roll and write game that I made about filling in Minnesota with like plants and people
and flooding all the cities.
And flooding, if you have too many people, it's going to flood.
That's what I did in that game.
But I just remembered that I did this originally as a flip and write game. Oh. And I was like getting excited about all the possibilities, like, oh, there's so many thematic things that could happen, like a bear comes up, and people played it and they're like, I have no idea what was going to happen, so I couldn't plan anything. And you've played that version, I think, and I tried to make it simpler and simpler, but because they're cards, you just don't know.
Yes.
And then I finally was like, well, let's just try it with 3 different colored dice, and then it got way better.
It's foreshadowing again. It's all back to like the whole Slay the Spire thing when they introduced the intent system. Once players can anticipate what's going to happen, it just improves the game.
Yeah.
Which I guess it's an interesting point though, because dice just have foreshadowing inherently built in, because people can easily visualize what the outcomes of the dice will be. Mm-hmm. And so you don't need to have Spirit Island is a great foreshadowing system with its cards. But if you have dice, you don't even need that. Just the fact that they're dice tells you what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can still associate thematic things with the dice.
Oh, yeah.
Just because when, for example, in my game, I had 1s were the plants and 6s were the people or the cities, and so people associated those numbers with them. In a fully produced game, I might put icons on the dice.
Oh, sure.
But yeah,
I would be curious, if I could easily make the alterations and make it happen. 3 Sisters combined with That's Pretty Clever, where every zone is a different color. You roll the dice, and they're all different colored dice, and then you had to choose where you did the action by the die being removed. Mm. And if I could just cut and paste and just see what that was like, I'd be curious if that would be actually more interesting, because now it's okay, I really want that shed action. That gives me, if I roll a 6, that's actually 2 shed actions instead of 1, and it just completely changes the game, but makes it less predictable and more exciting on the dice end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you got to pitch this to them for version 2 or
That's Pretty Sisters.
That's Pretty Sisters. But Charlie, I think this is a really interesting point. Actually, dice just have foreshadowing built in.
Mm-hmm.
Or they
Are you gonna make some dice games now? Have you made dice games? I feel like most of the prototypes are cards.
Yeah, my what was it? Monster dungeon. What was it? Dungeon. It was the game I made about sort of monster ranching in a dungeon, where you built the dungeon and then you filled it with monsters, and then you fed the monsters and you rolled dice, and the monsters wanted higher dice than the ones they already had. That one, I forget what I forget what it was called. Dungeon. It might have been Dungeon Rancher or something. I don't know. It's on the shelf
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Junkernauts has those awesome 3D printed dice that you made too. But
yes, but now I'm
they're-
using regular dice.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, that was a fun series.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one.
And best of luck to you out there if you're listening and you want to try designing a roll and write. You know, I don't think we're past the craze. It's been going on for many years. I think they're here to stay. Publishers like them still, I think, because they're cheap to make.
Oh yeah, publishers love them.
Yeah. Easy expansion material for basically any game. You know, we could have played Catan again because there's Catan the roll and write.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
That might have been one of the earliest ones, actually, of the
roll
this
and
like
write.
new genre
Yeah.
of them, new era of them. So, with that, we'll wrap it up there and tune in next time for our next series, which we will figure out and announce.
No, we know what it is, but you don't yet.
Right.
Hey, thanks for listening to The Tabletop Takeaway. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. So please tell your friends and visit our website at thetabletoptakeaway.com, where you can suggest games and mechanics for us to cover next on the show.